there. You're listening to the Girl Talk podcast. My name is Carol.
I'm Kelly.
Hey there, I'm Tricia.
And we want to say thank you to our friends at Momentum Tire and Car Care for sponsoring today's edition of the Girl Talk podcast. They have 3 locations in North Carolina, so hit them up. Let them know you appreciate them sponsoring the Girl Talk podcast. Today we're going to talk about a common phrase in mental health, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I'll start out with a kind of a loose definition of what that means, and then we'll kind of lean on your expertise because of your background in social work. I think you could probably lend some light to this if this isn't exactly right. But I just did a quick Google search, and here's what it said: mental and behavioral disorders that develop from experiencing a traumatic event. Mm-hmm. Is that, would you say that's
absolutely
accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. Mental, physical distress, some other things that, in fact, you have had some post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that a little bit. Are you comfortable sharing your story?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think you've shared pieces of it before, but never kind of in its entirety. So let's rewind the clock.
Okay.
And you kind of tell us where this all started.
Yeah. And I would say that PTSD, I would say there's a continuum of it. Just as we look at it, it can be something that someone might classify as a mild response to a traumatic situation, all the way up to a very major response that might even require hospitalization. So there can be a PTSD response to a lot of different things, and it doesn't always look the same. Yeah. So I think it's important to talk about because by its definition, it's something that holds on to you, something that hangs on to you, and you continue to experience it. And it's good to know what's happening so that you can know then how to treat it. Okay. So with regard to my experience, I have a very, it's easy to define experience of PTSD, and it happened on 9/11. Because I lived in New York City at that time. And the day of 9/11, I was starting an internship at a mental health treatment facility, outpatient treatment facility for people in Brooklyn, New York. And I was living in Manhattan, New York. So to get there, I took this subway ride. And I remember getting on the subway, and I remember as it traveled down Manhattan, the island of Manhattan, before it crossed over to Brooklyn, just remember that beautiful day. I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be a beautiful commute to this internship that I'll be going to twice a week. I remember seeing the Twin Towers. I remember just thinking, oh, what a great morning this is. And then the subway went underneath the water and docked in Brooklyn, and I got out and walked from the subway stop to this outpatient treatment center, which took about 12 minutes to walk. And at some point during that walk is when the first plane hit. But I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. I didn't know it. No, I didn't. And so I walk into this facility. I remember walking in going, hello, I'm Tricia. I'm the new intern. Where's the bathroom? How can I help? Where do I put my little notepad? Had no idea what to even expect. So this particular treatment facility was designed to serve people that had schizophrenia and other very serious issues who'd come out of the hospital. So I didn't know what to expect with this population. I knew that they would be having some difficulty discerning what was true, what was not true, and I was ready to serve them. And so I walk in and I'm talking to people, and people are milling about and talking. And I remember this one little lady came up to me and she said, "Did you hear? A plane hit the World Trade Center." And I thought she was having an episode. I was like, oh, no, that's just terrible. Do we need to get you some medicine? I wasn't sure what to expect. Yeah. And it took a while before I realized, wait a minute, did something happen?
Yeah.
I say that because it was the delayed understanding of the magnitude of that experience that contributed to the trauma that I experienced. there are things that happen and we don't really understand them. And this dawning experience just made it worse because when we started to understand, something happened. Not only did something happen, something really big happened. And so we wanted to protect this, the clientele there. So we didn't show pictures of what was happening. So therefore I didn't see anything. I didn't see the images. We were just getting little bits and pieces. The supervisors brought us into the office and said, planes are hitting the buildings in New York. We don't know what's going on. None of our cell phones worked. And we were trying to still care for these people while trying to understand what was happening ourselves. And it was just this weird experience of fear and trying to focus on someone else. And it was my first day, so I didn't even know the people. It was just such a weird day. Yeah. And so then when we're trying to take them back to where they needed to go and then we needed to go home, I didn't know where to go. There were no subways. There were no buses. There were no cars. Everything had shut down. I'm in Brooklyn. I don't know anybody here. People were kind and offered, oh, you can come home with me. I didn't want to go home with them.
Sure.
I still didn't really know what was going on. I wanted to go home.
Right.
And it was just it was a very scary day because then I started to realize people had died. And I remember having to try to go home. And I was standing at the subway station and there were no subways that were running. And then one came through. And I remember I was on the phone with my sister going, should I get on this subway? I don't know. Should I not? Is it going to blow up? We didn't know anything. Was it still going? We didn't know. And I was talking to my sister and I'm sobbing because I was so scared at that point. And she said, I think you should get on. Well, I got on this subway and it was very crowded and it went the way it would go, the normal way, and there were no problems and no stops. But I'd never been scared to get on a subway before. I'd never been scared, hadn't even thought about it. It just was like part of your life. Yeah. I'd never been scared to get on anything, an elevator, a plane, a door, nothing. I'd never been scared. And all of a sudden I was scared. And then that changed everything for me, that experience. So I got home, I realized what happened, all of the things that had happened. It was just a terrible dawning that what was happening. So the reason I bring that up is because ever since that day, I have had times of claustrophobia, which is the fear of being enclosed, and also agoraphobia, which is the fear of not being able to get out in crowds, and just this fear of not being free and being able to escape. And it has been something that has hung on to me every time I get in. Even I'll go visit somebody even in a hospital, and I'm looking at the exit doors. Is this door going to lock? What if I can't get out? Yeah. Every time I get in an elevator, every time I have to take an airplane ride. And that is the essence of PTSD, something that a traumatic event that has had an impact on you that you carry with you. And you guys, I've prayed, I've hold on to Bible verses, and I have been healed in many ways and in many experiences to be able to take trips to India, to Israel, to wherever I've gone. God has gotten me through, but it's never been a moment of, well, that's done. Yeah. And that, I think, is PTSD. Yeah. So I think a person can have a mild reaction to something. Sometimes you can tell that you're having a trauma when you almost see yourself. You're out of your body. You see yourself from afar almost. Some people experience that. Maybe they gotten scared or something's happened that has threatened their physical body, threatened your survival. You almost see yourself. That's a traumatic situation and can hold on to you. So,
this is just my own ignorance, so forgive me for that. But are panic attacks part of that response?
They can be. So there's that continuum of response. Panic attacks can absolutely be. And that is one thing I had. The next forever since 9/11, I have gotten into the subways or an elevator and feared a panic attack. I have had them, and they are awful. And it is when your body reacts as if you are in a completely scared, tragic, traumatic situation, even though you're not. And pulse rate, breathing, you almost tunnel vision, you can't see, you can't hear, blackouts. These are panic attacks.
Do you always know what the panic attack is attributed to? Did you always know that was a direct result, or did it happen and then you go, "What in the world is this?"
Yes, it happened. And what in the world was this? I sat down in an uncrowded subway, and all of a sudden I started to think, "I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here," kind of a thing. Yeah. And I remember my breathing was so fast. I was sweating profusely, and this moment of panic. And I remember I counted, I was reading a newspaper, and I counted the letters. 1, 2, 3, 4. I just counted the letters, anything to get my mind off of that and onto something where I could maintain a control of my physical self. That helped me.
Yeah, you said you've been healed in many ways.
Yeah,
from it, not fully.
I haven't had any panic attacks in a decade.
What did you do to get healed from your PTSD experiences?
Well, God provides many ways of healing. Sometimes He heals us immediately, and we're never the same again, and that is awesome. He also provides other ways, and sometimes that's therapy, Christian therapy, medication, and I have used all of those. I for a while, when I was in graduate school, I was going to a secular therapist, and she was helpful to help me understand some of my reactions and help me trace back some of the derivation of my experiences. But of course, she wasn't able to provide for me the real solution. Yeah. So then I started Christian counseling. And that has really been helpful as well, because she helps me see things in light of Scripture, in light of what God says. But she thinks we go through the thought process, and then we think about replacing the scared thoughts or the fears with God's Word, and that is hugely important. Yeah. I have a list of scriptures that I will read. I call them elevator verses that I'll read in the elevator if I need to remind me of God's truth in those moments. But I've also used medication for airplane trips. Just because it is something that has helped me relax my physical symptoms so that I can just be more present.
So let me ask you this, Tricia, because somebody may be listening to this today and they have not experienced the amount of trauma that you have, and I would think that everybody living in New York would experience some measure of that. Yeah. But if they see a friend, what are some warning signs that they can look for to think this friend or loved one may need to seek out help in additional ways than I'm able to give them? Because I think I'm a fixer, and if I see somebody hurting, I just want to fix it. I just want to say, and that's not something that you can just automatically fix.
Gosh, I wish it was.
Yeah. So tell me how somebody who loves you can love you well during that time, and what are some of the warning signs you should look for to know that you need additional help?
I would also say that it's not a competition about like the traumatic thing, so you don't have to feel like you don't have the right to have the responses that you've had, even if it didn't seem like a big deal to someone else. If you are struggling, please get some help. That I want to say that. And there's no shame in that. God has provided us lots of different options and ways for us to connect with Him and get the healing and the help that we need. I think it's really just being aware of when there's a change in your friend. Is there a change in that person? Maybe they're not as social as they were. Maybe they're spending more time alone. Maybe they're not talking when they're talkers. Maybe they're talking a lot when they don't usually. Maybe they are expressing anxiety in a different way. And sometimes that's pressured talk. Talk. So is there a change in a person? for example, for me, as I get closer to something and I'm taking a mission trip soon and I'm already thinking about the flight and praising God because I know he's going to get me through it, but I'm thinking about it. And when I go into that mode, you might see me seeming very anxious or talking a lot about it or saying something that sounds funny that's different than I might ordinarily say. So looking for the change, looking for that pressure that you're seeing that person going under would be a good sign that they might need a little extra support.
Also, if you know somebody in a traumatic event happens to them, like the suddenness of 9/11 or there's an accident or something like that, what should we encourage and or love them to do in wake of something like that? Because I know for me, a lot of times when something happens, I'm the first one to say, I'm fine, it's fine, it's fine. And it's like when your kid get hurt or something. You take them to the doctor, they get their arm casted up, and then you fall apart, much later. So I think people's automatic response is, I'm fine. But if they've had some kind of traumatic event happen in their lives, how do we help them navigate that and make sure they really are okay? Mentally.
I think the thing that's most helpful is to not feel judged. So encourage them that it's okay to have the feelings that they're having, because if they're shutting off their feelings, if any of us shut off our feelings, there's no help. There's no help there. And if you feel judged or like you shouldn't have these feelings or I'm a bad Christian because I'm struggling with this, there's no help there. So the more we can encourage each other to be honest about how we feel, it is okay to struggle at times. That is the most helpful thing, because when our defenses are up, nothing gets in. That's the definition of defense. So helping that person or yourself take down the level of defense and know it is okay to struggle, and that it's a safe place, providing a safe place, and then encouraging them to get treatment, to get help, to get support. And the support can look differently for everybody. It might be just being able to go walking with a friend, but getting some support and finding a safe place where you feel like you can talk is helpful. And I think a lot of us who've gone through it, we feel, number one, we feel embarrassed. Like, I feel embarrassed. And number two, I feel defined by my experience. I don't want to be defined by that. Sometimes we identify as our wounds. We've talked about that before, and we don't want to do that. But in order to let that go, you have to have some communication and some support. So the very fact that you care enough about that person is step one. And then number two, helping them let go of judgment and know that their safety and it's okay to get help.
So good.
How do you feel about people asking you about it or talking to you about it? Like, would it be helpful for folks to ask you about your trauma, or to ask you about your trauma response, or to ask you, check in with you and see how you're doing? So how you doing on those elevators, or how you doing in the subway these days? Is that helpful, or does that just make it worse?
No, I think it's helpful.
It up again.
Kelly, I'm glad you asked that. Another trauma that I have had is what happened with my mom. And I think grief can also be a trauma for a lot of us. And so it's wonderful to be asked. It's wonderful to be asked, because I think people don't want to ask about certain things because they don't want to make it worse for you. Kind of, that's right. They don't want to bring it up if you're not thinking about it. Well, it's oftentimes
just ignore the elephant in the room.
Right. Oftentimes it's already something that we're thinking about. It's already something we're praying about. So being asked is a wonderful thing. It's like grief. Like, if you ask me how how you doing? I know you're probably missing your mom. Yes, I am. Can we talk about that for a second? That helps. It's almost like releasing the pressure in a valve. And then it kind of can go out. But being asked is wonderful, and being encouraged. Hey, I saw you get on that elevator. Hey, good job. That might not have been hard for that person, but I know that might have been hard for you. Good job. I see you. I see you leaning on God. Thank you. That's very helpful. So yes, being asked and talking about it, because it's most likely on our minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, like you said too, there's a lot of folks who have PTSD that might not be near as traumatic as being in New York City on 9/11.
Yeah.
But might just be, smaller things.
Yes.
And so people do have have some responses that are unique to them.
Yeah.
And some traumas that are unique to them that might be smaller on a smaller scale, but still need to be addressed.
Yeah.
Anytime you replay something in your mind, and that could even be a difficult conversation, an argument with a friend, that can be traumatic. That's a traumatic response. You are replaying it in your mind. So it doesn't, there's no competition. It's not, well, my trauma's worse. No, I mean, anytime you're replaying something, you're struggling with a bit of a traumatic response.
Wow.
Yeah. I have a little bit of PTSD trauma on a very mild scale from COVID.
Yeah.
And from my own physical response to getting COVID whenever I got it back in 2021, I guess it was, that I had a really hard time breathing and, had that pulse oximeter on my finger kind of all the time. Am I going to breathe enough? Do I have enough oxygen? Am I going to die? Is this going to kill me?
Yeah.
Kind of just fear. And so now anytime I get even the slightest bit stuffy, you better believe I am doing everything I possibly can to get it keep it from being stuffy, because all of that anxiety comes back of am I going to have a hard time breathing?
Mm-hmm.
What is this going to do to me? And I just,
that's it, Kelly.
I think about that. It's on a much smaller scale. Don't need counseling or to be hospitalized over that kind of thing. But it definitely is a response where I then relive that experience every time I get stuffy.
And it affects you.
And it affects me.
That's it.
Right.
That's the traumatic response.
I can't put a blanket over my head now because, I used to be able to do that. And now I can't even put a blanket over my head because it means I can't fully breathe and don't have the control over just my breathing.
Yeah. That's it.
Lord, please don't give me a cold ever again.
Well, I have had that too. Mm-hmm. And there was I think I shared with you, Carol, maybe it was like a few months ago. I got like a stuffy cold and I was stretching. I remember I was downstairs in my room, in my or like den or whatever, and I was stretching and I couldn't breathe. And all of a sudden I had this thought, I can't breathe. I'm not going to be able to breathe. I'm going to have to go to the emergency room because I can't breathe. It wasn't even that stuffy of a nose, and I started to feel the feelings. Mm-hmm. The heart rate the thoughts started to roll. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to go to the emergency room, and I did get healed from that because I've had stuffy noses twice since then. Mm-hmm. And here's what I did. In that moment, I said, in the name of Jesus Christ, I will not have these thoughts. Yeah. I stand up in the name of Jesus. No, you have no place in my mind. I'm talking to the enemy or whoever's whispering in my ear. You will not win. And I stood up to those. And I've had 2 stuffy noses since then. And I'm like, yay! Yeah. I didn't go panic over the stuffy nose. Right. But that's it. That's how it starts. And I think a lot of people have had trauma from COVID. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I think it manifests itself too in how we act after when we're dealing with that extra level of fear and anxiety.
Yes.
And so to kind of talk about how do you know somebody may be experiencing PTSD or something in that moment. All of a sudden, I know that when I'm feeling that level of anxiety, I'm going to treat people around me much differently. Mm-hmm. And that, like, if I have a cold, and normally back, in 2019, and I got a cold, I would still be jovial. And I might be a little run down, but I wouldn't be irritable. Mm-hmm. And so, but now if I get a little bit stuffy, I am full on irritation mode.
It's the change.
It's the change. Yep. It's the change in somebody's natural responses to how they may have handled something yesterday. Yeah. They're not handling it the same way today. Mm-hmm. There might be
pre-trauma.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you for sharing your story so vulnerably.
Yeah.
Because I really do believe it's going to help people. And I, having walked alongside you for a couple years through some different things. It's been so inspiring to me to see the ways that you've continued to get back up.
Thank you.
And so I just want to honor you and to say that I
Make me cry.
am so incredibly honored to be your friend. But I want you to know how much it means to me that you would be so vulnerable and share your story here on this platform. We do not take that lightly at all, and I know that was a hard thing. So thank you.
Thanks.
For doing that. And if you have questions or ways that we can help you, you're always welcome to reach out. girltalk@thelightfm.org. Remember to rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you to our friends at Momentum Tire and Car Care for their sponsorship of the Girl Talk podcast. We love you folks. Couldn't do it without your help. So thank you so much. And we will save you a seat right here when we gather next time for the Girl Talk podcast.